Support for this podcast comes from Frito-Lay and the 2023 Snack Bracket Championship. The Frito-Lay Snack-It Challenge is underway, and fans are voting on their favorite snacks to crown champion. We're talking about prime-time matchups between the best 64 snacks in the land. Will Ruffles Ridges reign supreme? Can Doritos defend their dynasty? Or will Smart Food use their smarts for a surprise upset? Only you can decide. Get in on all the action for a chance to win up to $1,000 or a year's worth of snacks. Let your snacks be heard. Just go to fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com to vote and enter for a chance to win. No purchase necessary. Sweepstakes ends April 3rd, 2023. Void where prohibited. Year's worth of snacks awarded in the form of 52 coupons, each good for one bag of chips. See official rules at fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com.
Cincinnati inbounds. Copain will let it air ball up, and it is no good. And the Knights have knocked off 15th-ranked Cincinnati. The UCF Knights have knocked off a ranked opponent for the first time since 2011. It's a court storming at CFE Arena on a Sunday afternoon where the Knights have beaten Cincinnati 53-49.
What is up, Knight fans? Welcome to the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. I'm Jeff Sharon, along with Eric Lopez. We are not joined by Mark Daniels, who you just heard. Give the final call of the big story of the week, UCF men's basketball's win over Cincinnati, courtesy to Mark and to UCF Athletics, UCFKnights.com, whose SoundCloud we found that on. Pretty nice of them to put that up there. And also the Knights' flagship station, 96.9 The Game. Wow, that is just one of a bunch of huge stories that happened this week, isn't it, Eric?
Yeah, that's been the theme. UCF knocking off ranked teams, big games, a lot of excitement. All themed is the big theme this week.
So we got a lot to dive into. We got men's basketball, obviously the big win against Cincinnati, which we're going to go in on here in a little bit. We've got women's basketball getting ready for their tournament, 19-win season, not too bad. First year under Coach Abe. We've got also track and field, women's track and field, winning the American Athletic Conference Indoor Championships. That's a big win for Jeanette Bolden and the UCF track and field crew. We've also got baseball and softball to get into. UCF playing Florida for 2 games this weekend. Or not this weekend, but this week, I should say, in the midweek. Number 2 ranked Florida, nonetheless. And also, a little bit later in the show, we'll talk about the brand new facilities vision that UCF has, and Danny White unveiled this past week, and all the plans that they have set up for UCF, coming with hopefully a bunch of new donations in the not too distant future. They've already got a few donations on there, so there's a lot of stuff to talk about this week. So let's dive right in, Eric. Let's talk about men's basketball. What a week! As the Knights right now stand at 19-10, thanks to, I think we can say this. We thought it was possible, but it really was an unexpected upset victory over number 15 Cincinnati in CFE Arena on Sunday. 53-49 was the final. First time that I saw the fans storm the floor in probably 10 years, right? I mean, I remember we stormed the floor a couple times during the old A Sundays, but yeah, a floor storming win for the Knights over 15th ranked Cincinnati, and they're at 19. They have 19 wins with 1 game to go against putrid USF this coming Thursday. Eric, let's put this into context here. This is one of the 3 or 4 biggest wins in Division I program history?
Wow, right off the bat, hardball question there. Wow, that's an interesting question, because how do you categorize the biggest wins? For example, winning the 2004, 2005 ASUN championship tournament championship games to me are significant, because that punched your ticket to the NCAA tournament. So I'll even
go back even further than that. The 2 before that, I think 96 and 99 or 94 and 96, I can't remember, but you could say like the first one, those are Division I.
Right.
The back-to-back obviously are up there. In the Conference USA / American era, the win over Florida's up there. They were ranked at the time. You remember that. The win over
that was at the Amway Center.
Yeah,
that was at the Amway Center in Orlando. That was
I think that UConn win's probably up there too.
In the Bahamas.
In the Bahamas, there's a few that are up there. I think.
Yeah, I think this is. Now, by the way, the last time they stormed the court, since people are screaming right now on as they listen to this at you right now, Jeff, after they screamed at me after the fact, saying, "Hey, the Connecticut win and the Florida win were in different years." Okay, settle down. It was a little 2-year period there. Settle down, all right. And Jeff actually corrected me on that last week too. I don't know why people missed that, but
because they don't listen to me. No one ever listens to me.
Well, that's a fair point. I would say that the Cincinnati win is the biggest win at the UCF/CFE arena's history.
Okay. All right. That sounds
fair.
That's fair.
Because you mentioned the last time they stormed the court was that when they finally beat Memphis.
That's right. That's right.
On Donnie Jones.
Forgot that one.
But that meant that was not a Memphis team that was super, great team.
Yeah, they were. That was when Memphis sort of started their post Calipari kind of slide, kind of re-entry into the Earth's atmosphere.
Well, and what I remember about that, because I was at that game and I was sitting courtside, and when that was the first time that I saw them storm the court, and that was controversial a little bit from the standpoint there were some people that didn't think they should have stormed the court because Memphis wasn't ranked. It's not the John Calipari team in there. Whereas this one I think was more authentic. I think was more. I know there's a lot of talk about whether you should storm the court, not storm the court, and what and all that. And I don't know what your thoughts on that. I'm for storming the court. I don't have a problem with it. Obviously, you don't want it to get out of hand and all that, but I do think there are parameters. And I think in UCF's case. Look, I mean, it's the 4th time in the history of the program they've beaten a top 25 team. To me, I think it warrants it. And really a signature win. And I tweeted this out afterwards, a signature win for Johnny Dawkins. Yeah. And to put his footprint in this program, right? I mean, we spent the fall talking about when is that signature win for Scott Frost in UCF? And to be honest with you, I don't know if we ever got that signature win yet, right? I mean, we got some nice wins, but I don't think we have that, quote, signature win, hey, statement made here. Whereas we've gotten that now, Coach Dawkins here, to beat Cincinnati for the first time ever in general, but then to beat them in the 15th ranked team. And that's a big game for Cincinnati, by the way, because they were battling for the American Conference title with SMU, and that might have ended up costing them the regular season championship. So it's not like Cincinnati took the game for granted. That was a big game for them, and a fascinating game for me in that it was a defensive struggle, especially in the second half. And I don't know how much. I mean, I'm watching that in the person. I sat with Trace, our good friend from Nightline Podcast, by the way, which was entertaining. I strongly recommend you, Jeff, next year. You need to go to a basketball game with Trace. It's just phenomenal. He's got this game, and if you listen to their most recent episode podcast of Nightline Podcast, he breaks down this game that he has with 3 of his buddies, where they pick the highest scorer for each game for UCF basketball, and they have like dinner bet on it for the year and stuff. It's pretty fun, actually. It's pretty good. But UCF struggled offensively, and part of the reason they struggled in the last 8 to 10 minutes is because I thought they were running out of gas. They reminded me of that Seinfeld episode where Kramer's taking the car.
Where's this one going?
Remember the episode where Kramer has got the car and it's on E, empty, and his buddy tells him, "No, don't go. You got to drive it all out. Live it on the edge." And I felt like UCF basketball is like that. They were on E, like the gas was on E. It was blinking, and now the question is, can they just hold on to the finish line against Cincinnati? And thankfully, B.J. Taylor had that incredible 3-pointer to go up 5. And then thankfully, Cincinnati missed an alley-oop.
And then thankfully, Taco Fall, who's a 40-some% free throw shooter, makes both of his free throws.
Which is amazing. And it's funny because people, they asked me after the Temple win. Some people have reached out to me to ask me about questioning why is Dawkins leave Taco in there in those type of situations where he could get fouled and shoot, free throws. And listening to Coach Dawkins talk about that, he has confidence in Taco. And I think that's why this team has bought into Johnny Dawkins, Jeff. Don't you feel like, and being around him, he's the type, and he was on Tuck and O'Neill this week on Sports Talk 1080, and he talked about he believes in his players, and that's not just lip service. He genuinely believes that Taco Fall can make the free throws if he gets in that situation. He truly believes in him. And whether you agree with it or not, I think that helps the players, right? If you're Taco Fall and the players, doesn't that make you want to run through the wall for your coach when he believes in you, when maybe others don't think that you should be in that situation? And I think that's why, and one of the reasons why this team has accomplished what they've accomplished to this point, because I think they have bought into what Coach Dawkins is telling them and saying, and they know that he has their back.
Yes, I do agree with you, but I think that Coach Dawkins is also hiding the real reason why he leaves, in this particular example, Taco out there in crunch time. He's not out there for his free throw shooting, but I think Dawkins's play on this is I need him out there for two things: shot blocking and rebounding. When you got a 7'6" guy, remember we talked about with Taylor Young about this, that UCF is in the bottom half in the American in block shots, even with Taco Fall out there. Why is that? Because teams are afraid to go to the rim. And one of the big issues that you could run into there is, someone's best player decides to, late in the game, they're going to go to the rim, they're going to get fouled, they're going to try and shoot free throws. They're not going to try and do that with Taco because of his sheer size. And also you need the rebounding out there because they're shorthanded on the front line. So I think it's a calculated risk by Dawkins to say, I need the defense and the rebounding out there, and as far as the free throw shooting is concerned, I really could not care less. I'm gonna live and die with one of my three best players out there, which right now are B.J. Taylor, Matt Williams, and Taco Fall, in my opinion. And so far, that worked in that game. And I'll give you an example of why. You talked about the defensive struggle down the stretch. With 11:55 to go in the second half, Nick Banyard made a jumper that gave UCF their biggest lead. It was 46-35. So that means in the final 12 minutes of the game, UCF only scored 7 points and still won. Now, how did they do that? They held Cincinnati. They had 35 at that point. The Knights got outscored 14-7 in the final 12 minutes and won the game. That's defense. That is all defense right there. And that goes to Taco Fall. His presence in the paint is really felt by these teams that, let's face it, it's a drive and kick game these days in NCAA basketball. That's filtered down from the pros. You got a lot of point guards kind of like B.J. Taylor, who their game is to penetrate and either get to the line or kick out to the wide open three. And when you have a 7'6" guy in there, guess what? That leaves you only one real option. So what are you going to do? And I think it worked to perfection in this game. UCF gets the win, and it's a credit to their defense.
Well, and altering shots. I mean, even Coach Dawkins mentioned that in the post game, how possibly that missed alley-oop play
with 4 seconds left.
You wonder if the player that's trying to dunk the ball is thinking, "Where's Taco?" Right?
Oh, of course they're wondering that.
Yeah, and I think that that I've seen that with shots being left short because they're trying or shooting it too long because they're shooting the ball above the guy.
Yeah, short.
No question about it.
Up too high, and then
sure. Yeah. Well, and that's the significance. And Mark on the post-game show on the radio asked Coach and talked to Dawkins about the fact I was listening to the post-game on the way back from the arena and how that's, in a way, though, it tells you why the improvements of Taco this year. He's playing 30 minutes. You looked at that Cincinnati game, Coach Dawkins decided I'm riding with my 5 guys, because that's all I got. He really didn't use Chad Brown that much in the second half of the game because he knew he needed Taco, to your point, to knock off Cincinnati and to really make Cincinnati try to beat them, if you will, from over the top in the perimeter. But he basically went with 5 guys. So that's one of the other reasons why he leaves him out there. He really doesn't have a lot of options in the bench,
right?
Which, again, speaks to the remarkable year that they have had and why they were running out of gas in that game. But, look, it was a defensive tackle. Let me tell you, seeing Cincinnati in person, their ball pressure, because they try to turn it up in that is impressive. They are one of the top defenses for a reason in the last 10 minutes. In fact, let's play. We got Coach Dawkins here, talks about the victory and how rewarding it was, because really this was the type of game he expected with these two top defenses in the league.
We knew coming into this game that that's how we were going to have to win. You're not going to, you're going to win on defense against a team like this. It's a storied program. They hang their hat on the defensive end, and so we knew we were going to have to battle. And we hang our hat there too. And so we were fortunate. We were able to, defend just a little better than they were tonight. But they've had a great year. Mick does a great job with this program. I followed him for years, and what he's done there has been amazing. And they're great representatives of the American Conference.
And then, don't you think they're, Jeff, right there? I mean, Cincinnati's known for their defense, and I think UCF now is known for their defense. This is a defensive first team when it comes to UCF. They really set that tone going back all the way to when they played up in that tournament in the Carolinas earlier this year. Remember that when they beat Mississippi State in the College of Charleston in that College of Charleston tournament. And this is a defensive team first, and Taco's a big part of that because he alters shots and it's no easy baskets inside, and that's what kept them in these games, and they win the game. And it's huge to knock off a team like Cincinnati that prides themselves on defense as well. I know, sometimes people tend to critique defensive games and low-scoring games. Oh, it's not good offense. But, I mean, having watched that game, give credit to both defenses. Really made that game a tough, intense game, really. And credit to those guys for pulling out a huge victory on a lot of levels. To me, it's the biggest home win they've ever had on campus. I don't know if it's as big of a regular season win as, say, the Florida win at the Amway Center. That could be debated. I do think, though, it is the biggest home regular season win of all time.
To me, it's a throwback to, I know this is going to sound weird, but some of those A-Sun teams that they won with defense, and this team is winning winning with defense. I went back and I looked at the schedule here. They've won. Look at the close games they won. They beat Temple by 2. They beat East Carolina by 3. I know that East Carolina is not all that good, but still close game. Lost to UConn by 3. I mean, I'll grant you that. Okay, but the problems they were having in close games earlier in the season. Remember, they lost by 5 at Memphis. They lost by 5 to SMU. They seem to have flipped that around, and I'm really impressed with how this team has rallied around defensively and figured out like that's going to be our secret sauce this year, and especially considering the lack of depth they have. And the other thing I was really impressed with, and I think you were too, you were there, the atmosphere in that game. That was as intense a game as I have seen in the arena probably since going back to the Jermaine Taylor days when they were getting 6,000-7,000 a game.
Yeah,
to see Jermaine play, and it felt like a madhouse in there. It really did.
No, it did. It was a fun atmosphere, and I enjoyed the fans storming there. I'm for it, and it's a huge win. And Coach Dawkins, to your point, Jeff, talks about here after the game. He talked about how this is a huge win for the program, and it was great to have the fans involved in this win.
It was so special. Walking up the court, seeing the fans rush the floor, to see Matt, surfing everyone out there was amazing. He was, so it was a wonderful, experience for everyone. And that's what we want to see. We always said we're not going to get anything done special without all of us being committed. That's our student body, our community, our players and staff. And you saw that tonight. I think it all came together on a night like this where you saw everyone engaged. I thought the students were great. I thought our fans were amazing. It was electric in there again tonight. And it, culminated with them rushing the floor. Couldn't have ended any better for senior night. So just really happy about, where we're trying to move the program. We know we have a long ways to go. There's going to be some adversity, some ups and downs. But we are, we're really excited about the potential of what we know we can do here.
We got the best students in the country. We got, some of the best fans in the country. They're very passionate. So they're another thing. We don't want to let them down either. We want to represent this school with pride because it's bigger than us. It's not just about the 15 guys in the locker room. We represent a whole university. So whenever we go out the court, we want to give it all we got because we're representing them, and we want to make them proud, and we want them to come back. We want them to enjoy themselves because this is a great university. I mean, it's one of the best. It's the best school in the country, in my opinion. I mean, I'm from Orlando, and I love it here.
Jeff, how about that? Coach Dawkins and there, B.J. Taylor, talk about the passion of the fans, the passion for the school, and it brings up a
missing
question
from UCF basketball for a
while.
Well,
and let's bring that up because that was asked to me not only where I was at the game for Cincinnati, but I was also at the Temple women's basketball game, and I sat. I mean, I'm sitting with a who's who here. I mean, I sat with Trace at the men's game. I sat with Brandon Helwig for the women's game. He was covering it for UCFsports.com. And among others, Shannon Owens-Green of the Orlando Sentinel, among and there were a lot of conversations between Sunday and Monday, back to back, and that is, what's it going to take to get more people into those buildings? And let's just focus.
Saw it right there.
Well, and that's my thing. Let's start with the men's first, and maybe we'll address the women's version when we talk about them. So let's just focus on the men's for now. They had about 5,700. At the game. Obviously, you and I were there when they were drawing 8,000, 9,000, 10, big crowds. I think this, and I remember we had Taylor Young on this podcast earlier in the year, and there was a statement he made in that podcast that I think still rings true. And you remember when we signed off, he said, give UCF basketball another chance, to the point where, and I do feel that for whatever the reasons, a lot of people turned their back on the program at some point during the Donnie Jones era, probably right around the time when the sanctions came with football and basketball. And I feel like a lot of people kind of turned on basketball there because, hey, it was basketball's fault that we got into this situation, and Donnie's fault, and my God, it almost cost us in football and this or that, and et cetera, et cetera. Plus, I think there's an underlining, let's be honest, there's a percentage of fan base that only cares about the football program, doesn't care about the other program. So if they feel that another program harms the football program, they just take it out on them and stuff like that. So I think a variety of those reasons, the basketball program has been taken for granted. And my hope is that with this season with UCF basketball, which I think will end up in postseason, and we can get into what the possibilities are here shortly. My hope is that next year, now that they've proven that they can win and they have a good product, they're going to return pretty much the entire team except Matt Williams, which is a huge loss, as well as Banyard and Fayani. But the core, the B.J. Taylor, the Taco Fall, we all expect them to all return. And I think we'll have – to me, bringing exciting expectations next year with all the newcomers that'll be coming in, that maybe the fans can start buying into the program again and buying into Coach Dawkins. And I think Coach Dawkins, for his account, has done his part, not only on the court with winning games, but off the court. He's doing radio interviews. And I'm not just saying that as a producer of Tuck and O'Neill because he's been on our show 3 times. I will shill for – he's been on – with the shot doctor he was on. He's been on with Scott Inez. So this is not my point is he's making the rounds and to push the product and push the program. And I think that the media and fans want to blame that the media doesn't cover it in this or that. Well, the fans need to give the media a reason to talk about it.
Yes, and that's the thing. I thank you for saying that because this drives me nuts. The media is driven by fan interest, not the other way around. Stop
Correct.
saying that the media sets the agenda. We don't. We cover the things that you are interested in.
Yes. No, and listen, and I'll share this story because this story is now long ago enough to where I can share the story. I used to produce the David Bauman show back in 1080, about 4 or 5 years ago.
Fellow Syracuse alum. Go ahead.
There you go. And the show's on in Orlando and Tampa. And then we had a program director, and one of the constant conversations, obviously, that goes on is what topics you bring up and stuff. Because I know a lot of fans and UCF fans on the message board, well, they don't cover UCF, they don't talk UCF, and all this stuff. And Bauman is a huge basketball fan, college and pro. Loves basketball. It's probably his favorite sport. He loves talking college.
He's a Syracuse kid. Syracuse is a basketball school.
Correct. So he wants, he loved talking UCF basketball, covered UCF basketball back then and stuff like that. And the program director would constantly didn't like that because, there's a lot of debate about Central Florida, whether it's a college basketball market and stuff like that. And one of the arguments that was used against UCF in that conversation, in that meetings that we would have is, well, how many people are at the game? 2,500? If
right.
People cared, why aren't they going to the games? And so that's a part of it. That's a part of it. Now, I come from the camp that, hey, I like to talk about everything. But look, the fans have to show up. If fans don't show up, where's the interest? That's the question. Got to support the program, go to the buildings, watch the games, and then people start talking about it. And I think the example of that is look what's happened down in South Florida with the Miami Hurricanes. The Miami Hurricanes, which people used to say nobody cares about their basketball program. And since Jim Larinaga's arrived there, they've started to sell out games down in Miami. They've become conversational now down in South Florida when they used to not even care about Hurricane college basketball. When they win, people talk about it. When they don't, they don't. And I hope, and I think we've started to see a little bit of that, more UCF basketball talk this year because they're winning games, to your point. So now it's up to the fans. No more excuses. No more like, hey, they don't talk about it. They don't. You got to go out there and help the program. The programs help themselves. Now you got to help them, support them, because the players have talked about it. You heard B.J. Taylor about how the fan support, that's huge, and it helps them.
Yeah.
That building, I've been there when it's packed at 9,000, nearly 10,000. It's a tough place to play. And I think they can make a difference. So hopefully, and look, in defense, there is one little quirk with obviously the schedule quirks that with television, sometimes you're playing on a Sunday afternoon. Sometimes you're playing on a Saturday afternoon. Sometimes you're playing on a Wednesday and all that stuff. But
yeah, but you know what? You know when the games are. Show up.
Correct. And my thing is, like Sunday's Cincinnati game was a 3:00 Sunday game. Like, what else are you doing?
Right.
What are you
Football
watching?
Season's over.
Right. What are you doing? Like, what are you watching the Daytona 500? I know, because that was the lowest rated Daytona 500 of all time. So I don't think you're watching that. What other excuse you have? So
right.
To me, they need to get out and support the program. And I think Coach Dawkins has done that and so much. So to me, the fans that they're complaining about it and about coverage and stuff needs to shut up and just kind of worry about just supporting the program, and then everything else takes care of itself. That's always been my belief on that. So I think you agree with that from that regard. So I think hopefully that gets to that. Obviously, as we do this podcast, Jeffrey, they play USF on Thursday. Monumental not to have a letdown there.
That's a road game, by the way.
Road game in Tampa. It's going to be their senior day, and I know they're the worst.
ESPNU.
Correct. Big game for the trophy too. Warren I-4 coached. The points and all that. If they can get that win, all right, 20 wins, you secure a bye into the conference tournament. I think they're an NIT team at that point. I think they've done enough to an NIT team. If you look, there are actually sites that do NIT projections. And they have UCF.
You know why? Because someone's got to do it.
Exactly. So somebody's got to do it. I think they're an NIT team, which I think is remarkable. I think it would be remarkable. And I think Coach Dawkins probably is going to be one or two as far as Coach of the Year. Don't you agree with that? Like, I think he's one or two. I think it's between him and the SMU head coach for that race. Don't you agree with that?
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Although I still think I also think that that the Cincinnati coach deserves consideration.
Cronin
deserves that, although he may have lost it actually with this last
right.
game.
Tim Jankovich, by the way, is the SMU head coach.
Yes.
Like I could see him getting the nod because he replaced Larry Brown.
Right, and that's a thankless task.
Right, and he lost. Nick Moore was the best player on the team that graduated and stuff. So I could see Jankovich edging out Coach Dawkins, but that shouldn't take away from the job he's done. I think it's got to be one of those two. Obviously, I'm biased there, but I think it's going to come down to those two guys for Coach of the Year. But NIT, right? Don't you agree? NIT would be an enormous success. It would be incredible. If they don't make the NIT, the CBI is an option. And then this is the other conversation. What's your opinion on that? Because you have to put in money in a bid to play in the CBI. Are you for or against that?
Obviously, if you don't get into the NIT, I think you definitely should get into the CBI. I think that that you should put in to go to the CBI. I think the question is, when it comes to the CBI versus NIT question, is it worth being, say, a high-seeded CBI team and bidding to host a bunch of games, or is it worth getting into the NIT where I'm looking at dratings.com. They have UCF as this is one of those sites that does the NIT projections, and they project UCF as a 5 seed. And there are in each, I guess, region, there are a total of 8 seeds. So they would be playing on the road, most likely. UCF would be throughout the NIT. So do you trade road games in the NIT for home games in the CBI?
Yeah. I'd rather be in the NIT.
I would rather be in the NIT and test myself against competition. Like, for example, the 4 teams that they have as 4 seeds in the NIT right now would be teams on the line of Texas Tech, Alabama, BYU, Boise State. Those are I would like to test myself against those teams right there. I think it's about the competition. And if you win a couple, who knows? Maybe someone gets knocked off. You get to go to you get to play a game at home, maybe, if you get lucky, if somebody gets knocked off down the way. So, I would rather play in the NIT against the better competition, personally speaking.
Well, and financially, you don't have to put in, spend money to be in the tournament.
That's the other thing. That's the other thing too. But
the NIT is a more prestigious deal. But let me throw a crazy scenario out.
Okay.
At this recording, UCF's RPI is 77. 77.
Mm-hmm.
To put that in perspective, Syracuse, your beloved other alma mater, 79.
Yeah.
A lot of people have Syracuse in the NCAA tournament. Now, in Syracuse,
that's based entirely on whom they have played in the regular season and nothing more than that.
Well, in the ACC. Playing in the ACC has that advantage, obviously, beating a Virginia, Florida State. But
the win over Duke is obviously a big factor in that.
Absolutely. But here's my argument. Because I was hanging out with our friends, Michael Dono and Taylor Young, at halftime, and we were just throwing spitballs. What if this team were to make a run at the tournament and get to the final on Selection Sunday? Don't you have to put them in the conversation at least at that point for the NCAA tournament, the committee?
Well, this is where it gets fun.
Yeah.
Because they're the 4 seed. If they get to the final, that means that they will have likely had to knock off SMU too. Okay? So they will have beaten. Right now, UCF is would be the 4 seed. Let's lock the tournament in right now as it is.
Sure.
If UCF is the 4, UConn's the 5, as is currently the situation right now, UCF will have had to knock off UConn in Hartford, Connecticut. Not an easy thing to do, but it's very hard to beat. But UCF has lost to UConn twice, and it's very hard to beat a team 3 times. Then they will have had to knock off, likely, SMU, the 1 seed, all right, who's also 25-4 overall. Then they would likely play, if the seeds hold up, the winner of Cincinnati and Houston. So I would put UCF in. So if they knock off UConn and SMU, I think that should be enough to put them over the top. Because then they would be sitting, assuming they defeat South Florida, that would put them at 22-10 with wins in their last 5 games against 3 of the top 5 teams in your conference. And you're playing, and you're coming down the stretch with a let's see, right now they've won 4 in a row, beat USF, that's 5 first round quarters, 6, 7. So you're getting hot at the right time. And what was the other thing you were going to mention?
Well, here's the other thing, too, and this has been used in the past with as far as arguments to the committee. This team, UCF, was without their best player, arguably, B.J. Taylor, for the last few games of the non-conference and the beginning of conference play.
Right, for a chunk of the season.
So imagine if he was healthy maybe they don't lose a game to a George Washington or the home game again, earlier in the year. Maybe that's a game or two difference there, which could make the difference. So I do wonder. Look, and who knows? I mean, obviously, it's a lot of ifs, right? I mean, who knows? They could get knocked out early and then stuff like that. I think it would be kind of cool, though. I mean, because I think this tournament is wide open. This league is wide open. This tournament coming up, and we're going to get in more in it next week, is wide open. Don't you think, Jeff? I mean,
right now,
good as Cincinnati and SMU are, and they should be the favorites. It's not like, oh wow, it's a done deal.
Oh, they're beatable. They're definitely beatable.
So yeah, like you said, they're beatable. So anything can happen in this conference tournament. I just think it'd be kind of fun if UCF can make that run and get to the final. I think they start getting in the conversation with the Lenardis of the world. And I remember. That would be a fun conversation. I remember last year I was covering the tournament. I was at the championship game. It was Memphis versus UConn, and everybody had to hold on because that was the last game before the selection show, and everybody had to wait to see what would happen to that game because that would affect the brackets.
Mm-hmm.
That'd be kind of cool if it could happen to UCF. I do wonder, again, and one of the things that's hurt UCF this year from the conference standpoint, it's been a transitional year. So, for example, and this is why I think the RPI is flawed. For example, Connecticut on paper does not look like a good game. Like that's a bad loss. But anybody that plays Connecticut, for example, knows that that's anything but a bad loss.
Plus, I think they're better than their record says they are.
Exactly. Same with the Memphis and the Houston. That's why I think the RPI, and there's an ongoing debate going on in college basketball. If you notice, Jeff, and I know you follow it very closely, more and more people now are using Ken Palm and other systems other than the RPI to determine if a team is good or not good based on that instead of just the RPI formula. So, which I think is good. I think you need to have more opinions out there than just the RPI being the end all be all. But, that's my thought on that is that I think UCF could get themselves in the conversation. Now, again, for that to happen, they have to beat USF because they're actually going to probably get hurt by playing USF, which is the other flawed system here. You're getting punished because you got to play USF twice, which you have no control over. You have no control over.
And it only takes into account games that you have played. So
yes,
right. And but that's neither here nor there. If you played USF, a month ago, in that game, then your RPI would be jumping if your last game was the Cincinnati. At the end of the season, at the end of the regular season, everything pretty much evens out. I mean, this is why they have committees, examine this thing. And I think that style points may also take a look at it. If UCF kind of gets lucky a couple times, which it may take, that may affect them one way or the other. But I think that if they perform impressively, if we see a team that's sort of really starting to really peaking right now.
Yes.
If they
common
win,
sense, eyeballs.
Right.
Use your eyeballs.
If they win impressively against, say, UConn, and they win impressively against, say, SMU, then it could be. Then you could really start to get, quite excited about what's going to happen. On the other hand, they could go all the way to the final, win the final, and then we don't have to worry about sitting, No,
at that point, we would have a lot of different conversations take place. So, in fact, I'll make this proclamation. If they pulled that off, if they won the men's tournament title that Sunday, guess what? Emergency special edition
podcast
of the podcast on that night at that point.
Emergency podcast that night. We will definitely have to do that. So again, Thursday, we'll have to, first things first, got to beat USF on Thursday. It's their senior day. They're a bad team, which means that they are feeling vulnerable at home. And I think they're going to give us a better game than people might think.
Agreed.
Because
sleep on this.
They're hungry, and they would like nothing more than to totally ruin our chance at winning our 20th game of the regular season on their floor on their senior day. So, I'm not counting that as a W 100% of the way all the way just yet. I think that there's that we're going to get a game from them. So, speaking of getting a game, let's flip over to the women's side because we have to talk about the impressive move down the stretch that they made. They split the weekend at home. This weekend that we were talking about, Eric, they boy did they look good against SMU in winning their what at that time was their 6th consecutive game, 63-37. And that was on the Saturday. Then they had to come back Monday, and they had a game against number 23 or number 20, depending on which poll you look at, the Temple Owls. And a game that was very tight. Temple came out. They actually did take a big lead in the first quarter. UCF fought back. Temple took another, kind of expanded their lead in the third, and then UCF fought back again in the fourth, but came up short against Temple. 66-60 was the final in what was the final regular season game. UCF, I thought, played pretty well. They actually outshot Temple in this game, 47% to 37, but only made 3 threes. Temple made 7 of them, and there was a free throw disparity too. UCF was 5 of 12 at the line, uncharacteristically poor, where Temple was 15 of 19 at the line. Even though UCF out-rebounded Temple and outshot Temple, they still lost the game. Aaliyah Gregory led the team with 19, 9 of 16 from the floor. Zy Lewis in her final game on the home floor, final regular season game on the home floor, 4 of 10, 10 points, 2 rebounds. No assists for Zy. Jocelyn Massey was 4 of 6 from the field. She had 9 points and 11 rebounds. But Temple showed why they're a ranked team. They win the game. UCF came up a little, coming up a little bit short in this one, which is kind of a bummer. But when you look at, what UCF has been able to do as they finish this regular season, 19 and 11 in your first year under a new head coach and Coach Abe in a team that I think that had lower expectations than people thought. You're going to go to the conference tournament in Connecticut. They're playing, by the way, their first game's on Saturday. They're playing they're the 4 seed. They're playing the 5 seed is going to be Tulane, who UCF has beaten in New Orleans earlier this year. Where are you thinking that this team is right now?
It's phenomenal. I mean, who would have envisioned this?
Right.
I mean, basically, the same team as last year that won 7 games. 7!
Coaching matters.
And it's, just been they've been a bottom team the last 3 years or so. It's been a remarkable job. Like, I'm blown away that we're in this conversation. And we talked about Coach of the Year in the American. I think, again, we look at the women's situation. Obviously, they could just give it to Gino, right? I mean, they could just give it to Gino Auriemma. He wins another conference title. And some people now will snicker and say, well, he's got the best players. True. Some people actually thought they would lose a game this year, but whatever. Be that as it may.
Well, they came close a couple times.
Tulane almost knocked them off. If they don't go that route, then I think it's one of 2 people. I think it's Tanya Cardozo. Let's give her some credit at Temple, ranked in the top 25 for the first time in a decade. You mentioned the Temple game. I was there. They've got a dynamic backcourt. I mean, and I think that's what gave UCF some trouble in that game. Is the problem is when their backcourt, you really can't press them like Coach would like to press, like other teams that you've seen, because their backcourt's that good. Mm-hmm. And they could shoot from the perimeter and stuff. So they're very good. There's a reason why they finished second in the league, because they got some talented guards that really handle the basketball very well. And really with that 3-guard offense that they run, and Butts is one of their top guards they have there. Fountain is a junior guard that they like over there in Temple. So that's a good team. That's a really good basketball team. So when you look at the Coach of the Year, though, Cardoza obviously at Temple, Gino obviously will get a vote, but I think Abe needs to get the award and hopefully gets it because let's be honest, I'm sure a lot of people thought UCF would be the worst team in the league probably at the beginning of the year.
Or among them, certainly, I think.
You're right, with the improvements like Aaliyah Gregory, who could be, I think, will be the most improved player in the conference, could maybe get some consideration for all conference teams. It's just remarkable they're in this position to where I think they're a lock for the WNIT. I think they're a lock. Now, the WNIT, which is interesting, is 64 teams compared to the men's NIT, which is 32. So I think they're a lock. In fact, I'll give you this prediction. I think UCF will end up playing the loser of Stetson and Florida Gulf Coast. Those are the two top teams in the ASUN.
Interesting.
And they're going to compete in the ASUN tournament. Don't be surprised if they play in the NIT opening round there, either here at UCF or at Florida Gulf Coast or at Stetson, whoever loses that conference tournament. Also keep in mind, Stetson won the regular season title. And I mention that because head coach at Stetson,
Lynn Bria. Yeah, former UCF head coach.
Yes. Who and what's fascinating about that, because I know people within the UCF side, there were some people that were pushing when the job opened for Lynn Bria to return. I think it's worked out for all parties. I think Coach Bria, obviously with a great year at Stetson, and obviously with Coach Abe coming to UCF, I think it's worked out for everybody. But I think they're in great shape. I think the Temple game, look, Temple's very good. Keep in mind, UCF's been playing a lot of basketball down the stretch, a lot of emotions, too. I had a win at USF, which was an emotional win. One at Tulane. You win recently at SMU on Saturday, quick turnaround. Remember, Monday night was senior night. So I think they're in good spot. I think they get the bye, which helps in the quarterfinals. And they're really in a huge game in the in that matchup with Tulane, which is very interesting because Tulane has moved up to the 5 seed, which kind of surprised me, Jeff, because you and I both saw Cincinnati, and I was convinced that UCF and Cincinnati were going to play in a 4 versus 5, and Cincinnati kind of fell apart at the end of the regular season and dropped a little bit, maybe to their advantage because they're not in the UConn bracket, as Coach Abe referenced it. But the Tulane-UCF game is a big game because Tulane is in a must-win situation trying to improve their NCAA tournament hopes. Their RPI has dropped to 63. I speak of Tulane. So they're going to be desperate to get a win there and try to get back in the conversation for the NCAA tournament. And if UCF were to beat Tulane, you mentioned the game's Saturday. If they win, now unfortunately they're going to get UConn. If there's a positive, though, that game on Sunday, they would play UConn in the semifinals on Sunday. That game will be nationally televised on ESPN2, which I think is tremendous exposure for this program. So if they can get to that goal and play UConn on a Sunday on ESPN2, yeah, maybe the game won't go well. But to get that exposure and build that momentum going into probably the WNIT and then into next year, I think would be huge for this program. It's been tremendous.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that to me, the women's basketball team is the better, more satisfying, I think, story. Not to say that the men's team is not, or is not a good story. I just think that the way the women's team has come together this year is the better story. And what I'm really excited about is the fact that, you're losing 2 seniors. Only 2. Okay. Now, granted, Zai Lewis, who has been amazing, by the way, in that SMU game, became UCF's all-time leader in 3-point field goals in men's or women's history. She surpassed Jermaine Taylor for most threes made in a career in that game. So she's an all-time sharpshooter. You're going to lose that. Boy, that's going to be hard to replace, right? You lose Jocelyn Massey, but you can, the rebounding, the defense in the middle, but you can replace that. Zai's going to be a little bit tougher to replace, but you can find shooters. And like you said, if they get to that point where they can play UConn on that Sunday afternoon, of course it's likely that they could that UConn is going to do UConn things. But let's also not forget the fact that I thought UCF played fairly well against UConn in the game they played earlier this season when they hadn't quite figured themselves out. Gino himself said, they're going to be a problem. And, they held UConn under, they did hold UConn under 100 points. They forced UConn to go to zone in that game, which is something that they never do, to counter some of the issues that UCF did present to them at a certain point. During that game. So I think it's important, again, remember, you have to kind of manage your expectations a little bit. And, but the fact that they are, and you got to get through Tulane. I know Tulane's going to be a tough team to beat because, like you said, they're looking at their resume. But interestingly enough, Eric, They're only
almost knocked off UConn, by the way. Let's not lose the fact.
That's a very good Tulane team that I thought played a poor game at home against us. That's why we beat them. Yeah. But interestingly enough, though, only 4 teams finished the regular season in the American with winning records in the conference season. UConn, Temple, USF, and UCF. Tulane, SMU, Cincinnati, Memphis are all clustered at 7 and 9. In fact, Tulane, SMU, and Cincy all have identical records, conference and overall, 16 and 13. So that tells me that UCF has actually outperformed most, not just their own expectations, but I think most of the actual conference in general. I mean, I saw USF in person. That's a good basketball team. We saw Temple. We know about UConn. And if you take away all, everybody else who's, basically, below you, they're all below UCF at this point. That's a pretty impressive resume that UCF has put together at 9-7 in the conference, 19-10 overall. So I'm excited to see what they do against Tulane in the basketball championship. Remember that they play at noon on March the 4th, which is,
Saturday.
Saturday, okay. So, and that game will be, by the way, on ESPN3 or Watch ESPN, which you can see with your cable subscription. So,
sure.
Two quick
thoughts.
Go ahead.
2 quick thoughts on that. You mentioned the win total. I think, too, it's worth mentioning. People may not be aware. This state is very good at women's basketball. I mentioned earlier about Stetson and Florida Gulf Coast. Florida Gulf Coast has been, dominant, been perennial in the NCAA tournament. Stetson right now winning the regular season title. Florida State, top 10, top 15 program. Miami's a top 15 program in the state. USF, you've seen them in person. It's a top 25 program. I think this year also, with that win, especially at USF, a signature win for Coach Abe, I think was a message that UCF now is going to get themselves in that conversation in this state for women's basketball, for recruits, and for quality basketball.
Yeah, right where they want to be. I think you're right. The signature wins this year for both programs, men's and women's. Women's at USF, men's against Cincinnati. And now the secret's out. So what do you do? And then it comes down to managing expectations for next year. But one foot in front of the other. Women's against Tulane in the conference championship on Saturday at noon. And then, of course, the men Thursday against USF with a 20-win season on the line. Both teams with 20-win seasons on the line in their next game. So we'll see how they're able to pull through there.
Real quick before we move on, because we brought this up with the men's earlier, and this was brought up about the women, the attendance. They asked me, and they wanted to ask you about it. My thing is, I think the attendance with women's basketball is not a, quote, UCF issue. I think that's a women's college basketball issue. I think if you look across the country, except for certain places like Connecticut,
Tennessee, and places like that. Right.
I don't know the answer to that. I don't know the answer. Do you have a solution, an answer on bringing more fans to women's basketball? Because I think it's a tough spot. Because you're going up against a lot of times, it's men's basketball versus women's basketball, right? So a lot of people prefer men's basketball. They prefer the above the rim action. A lot of times people are going to make the commitment, for example, to go to a men's game on a Sunday. Maybe don't want to come back the next night for back to backs. And I do think, and I've said this, I do think that women's basketball has lost viewers as far as women's sports to softball, to women's soccer, to volleyball, and you've been involved with the volleyball. And I would say at UCF that women's basketball is 4th behind women's soccer, softball, and volleyball from a interest standpoint. But do you have a solution, anything you think could be done?
Yeah, play UConn as much as humanly possible. No, I mean that's kind of the issue, right? Like they're the draw. They are the dominant. They're the Beatles. Well, the problem, right? The problem is it's like predictable, right? It's like, well they're going to lose by 40, 50 if you play UConn. I don't sense but everyone
like
tunes in to see David Slay Goliath. And there's always the chance that you can play. I think that from a UCF perspective, I don't know what the answer is from a general college basketball wide perspective. But
because again, I don't think this is a UCF problem. I don't think this is a UCF problem. I don't think, oh, wow, why aren't UCF fans supporting women's basketball? I think this is across the country. I don't, it's, if you want to say UCF's apart. I mean, let me ask you, you were at USF for the Cincinnati. What was the attendance there?
They had a pretty good draw in the Sun Dome. I think they got about 3,000. And it was, but I'll tell you one thing. It was an active and loud 3,000. And the reason why it was because they play an exciting brand of basketball. You know, if you watch that game, it was
Fernandez.
Yes, it was up tempo. It was 3-point shooting. It was like the most fun playground game you could possibly watch. I was calling the game for the American Digital Network. It was really one of the most entertaining games I've watched in a long time, and that goes to the style of play. I think they've been trying to open up the style of play. Sure. I think they've been trying to make it a little bit more TV friendly. That's why they went to the 4 quarters, the shorter shot,
which I like. I
like that too. And I would not be surprised if the men's game goes that way too.
There's been chatter about that. Yeah.
But it comes down to style of play, and I think that and from UCF's perspective, that's where they're kind of caught in between a rock and a hard place. Because I think Coach Abe said this after the UConn game herself. You get in a track meet with them, they're just going to run you into the ground. They're going to score 200 points on you, and the key to beating UConn is to slowing them down, and that's what UCF tried to do. They tried to use the entire shot clock basically on purpose, and they still held them to 88 points. But they still lost by quite a bit. But that UCF at least followed the game plan. I think when UCF gets the kind of talent that Coach Abe wants, they're out there on the floor. When they get to a point where they can challenge UConn, like we said, they're 4th in the conference right now. If they get to the point where they're good enough to challenge UConn, that's when you're going to start to see the attention being paid by the UCF fandom, because it's going to surround that, oh boy, are we going to have a showdown with UConn? And it kind of reminds me of when the men's team was in Conference USA, and there was everyone else, and then there was Memphis and Coach Calipari, right? And the casual fan looked at it and said, well, what are they going to do against Memphis? If they're competitive against Memphis, I'll start paying attention. But if they're not, then I'm not going to care. UCF has to get competitive with UConn. Now, I know that's a tough ask. Okay,
I was going to say, you could say that about the rest of the country.
That's a tough ask because, let's face it, they're going to trick, but here's the thing. They're not going to keep winning games forever and in perpetuity. Okay? So now it comes down to timing. Are they going to eventually come back down to earth? Are they going to, I think I mentioned this about men's basketball. Are they going to re-enter the atmosphere again? And if they do, and if you catch them at the right time in the next year or two, then you could kind of get the momentum kind of moving around your own program a little bit. Maybe not in terms of national talk. It'll if let's say UCF defeated UConn, upset them at some point. It's going to make national news because UConn lost, not because UCF won, right? But at least around here, all of a sudden everyone says, wow, UCF women's basketball is for real. They beat UConn. We better start paying attention to this. And it's an uphill battle the entire way. I think we should start paying attention to them now, because I think this is a really good team that's extremely talented. And I think that they're going to make some noise in the tournament up until the point that they get to UConn. And then UConn is most likely going to do UConn things. But again, in a one-game situation, right, Eric? You never know.
The thing I will say, in fairness, and I think Jose Fernandez done a heck of a job at USF. I think one of the things that's helped them as far as the support over there is, you mentioned the style of play, but also it helps that the men's basketball program there has been a disaster. I think they've only made one NCAA tournament, even during the Big East days, and that was Dan Heath. And their program has been bad. And I think it's almost like, at the end of the day, people want to see a good product, and they don't want to see a bad product. And I think they've come to the women's, and the women's over there, they've been consistent. And I think that's one of the keys, is you have to be consistent.
Yeah, they're
so
consistent.
People buy it.
They're consistent. They've been improving, but yes. You're right. I think the key is they put an entertaining product on the floor.
Sure. So it's a combination of those things.
Right.
As far as UCF, I think they got to be consistent. They got to prove they can win again next year and stuff. And they got to get that marquee player that people can talk about. But I will say this, because you've covered the program a long time. I mean, going back to Gail Striegler and Joy Williams, even when they won, there wasn't that oomph. And I do wonder, I just think that UCF, with the women's soccer program, the way it is, with the support they've gotten for years and the tradition and the history, I think it's always going to be above women's basketball. I think volleyball, which you've seen with Coach Dajane and stuff, and playing at the venue, a great place to watch a volleyball match, I think helps that product. With Coach Gillespie, what she's done with softball and the success they've had, I've seen a jump in the last 4 or 5 years. I mean, people bombard me with questions with softball that they didn't do it 6-7 years ago. I do wonder if women's basketball, from a UCF fan standpoint, can overcome all that. And if I wonder if, as great as that CFE arena is playing, I know people don't want to hear that, but would they be better off playing at a place like the venue for basketball? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
A more intimate place than instead of playing in a 10,000 seat stadium arena.
Some programs do that.
Yes.
And I've always wondered that. I would love for them to do an experiment one day. They used to a couple years ago. I did PA for a early season tournament when Joy Williams was the head coach, that they did play in the venue because there was something going on in the arena. I don't know what it was. It might have been a convention, or I don't know. It could have been Yo Gabba Gabba for all I know. But I thought when I was in there, I was like, this place is a pretty good basketball.
Right.
I call it obviously it's called the venue, but this is a good basketball venue. And if you're only drawing, say at first, 2,000-3,000, or maybe even less, pack them into a smaller place and turn that place into a real madhouse. You can get the students in there.
Right.
You can sort of create demand.
Yes.
And more importantly, for the product on the floor, you can turn that gym into a place that opponents fear coming to. And I think that can work out in the long run for UCF. Now, they won't do it because the women's basketball team should, rightfully should, I think, play in the arena. But I think that it would be really interesting to see them play maybe a couple regular season games inside the venue just to see what the atmosphere will be like, because we know from our student days it can get loud in that place. And obviously we know that from volleyball too. We've had some matches where they played USF and some other and some other pretty good teams, volley bowls and stuff like that. That place can get really it gets hot. It kind of reminds me of like the stories that they used to tell the old Boston Garden in that respect. How much of a home court advantage the Celtics had during the Larry Bird era, and the venue could kind of be like that if they ever decided to try that.
I agree. I'm a proponent of that. And I think part of the issue that women's basketball has is they want to be treated like the men's basketball program. And I think that's where you get. So as a result, you're going to get compared and you're going to lose that battle. One of the things, and I've had this conversation with Adam Schick, who calls women's basketball and women's softball for Florida, the University of Florida, and he does women's soccer. And we've had this conversation. Like, for example, and you know this, women's volleyball, one of the things they did is they lowered the net. Compared to what men's volleyball does. So they differentiate themselves a little bit. Women's softball, if you look at softball versus baseball, they're completely different products. They're completely different sports. Softball it's more of a small ball game. There's more strategy involved. They have they have dirt on the infield instead of grass. There's just they differentiate themselves. So as a result, there's not a direct comparison between the two products. Whereas I feel like if women's basketball did what you just said, if they put themselves in a venue, it would differentiate themselves. They would be different than the men's basketball. Instead of being in that same building like the men's is, I do think it would give them their own personality, give them their own place, and I think it would help them give them their own identity, if you will. I think where women's basketball sometimes run into the problem is they're playing at the same places that the men's are, and you're just not going to – and they want to be compared like the men. They want to be treated like the men. And sometimes you just want to do something different. You got to give the audience and the customers something different. And I agree with you. I think a place like the venue would help a lot. And I'll give you an example of that. Stetson. You wouldn't have been to that building. I've been to that building.
Center in DeLand, right?
Yeah. I was there when Stetson women's basketball has played home games. I saw them play UCF there. And they've got a great Stetson women's basketball fan support there. And that place is tight. It's small, but it's very comfortable. And so as a result, they're on top of the fans when they get really loud. And I think that would help. I think a lot of these women's basketball programs, not just the UCF thing, but other programs, if they had a place that was more intimate, maybe, instead of 10,000, 3,000, 5,000, like you obviously would have to study your numbers, and then how you sell the UConn game. If you have a game like UConn, that could be the game you could play it at the big arena. Maybe you draw more people, but then it'll be unique. It's like, oh, hey, they're playing at the CFE arena. They're not playing at the place. So, I mean, there's a lot of different things they could do that I don't think they consider doing. I know Adam Schick has brought up the idea. What do you think about this? I know coaches don't like this idea, but he's brought up lowering the rim. So there you have more of because people love the dunk, right? People love the above the rim action. And maybe if you lower the rim at women's basketball, that would draw more people. You buy into that?
No, I don't buy into that quite as much.
Okay.
The ball is already smaller. You know that, right? So
very good point. Yeah, good point.
So
good
I wouldn't mess with the rim. Then it's like, okay, do we shorten the 3-point line? No. Do we shorten? Do we do other things to the side of the court? No. Keep the rim the way it is. I think that from what is conducive to helping UCF win more basketball games. I think a better environment, a better fan environment would certainly help. But, then again, they could just keep winning games, and then you don't have to worry about, where do they play, because they'll end up because they could start selling more tickets to the big arena. So we'll see how it goes. They got their game against Tulane on Saturday to open up the tournament. Make sure you follow the American Athletic Conference tournament at theamerican.org, and also those games will be televised on ESPN3. We've gone over an hour in this first segment.
Basketball fever, baby.
I know,
it's
man.
March Madness.
We're recording this on Wednesday, March the 1st. It's March, but we got a lot more to talk about. We're going to stick around, because coming up next, we're going to talk some track and field, UCF winning the American Indoor Championships, and we're also going to talk about softball and baseball and some of the new facilities plans coming up as well that were released by Danny White this week. Stick around. This is the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Back after this.
Hello, Night Nation. I'm Andrew Fegley.
And I'm Trey Strelko. Where are we? This isn't our usual spot.
It looks like we've landed in the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast.
Oh, yeah. I've heard of those guys.
Nightline has UCF sports covered.
Week in and week out, we bring you interviews with newsmakers and in-depth analysis of UCF sports.
Subscribe to our weekly podcast on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Be sure to subscribe to Nightline on YouTube, like us on Facebook, and follow us on Twitter at UCF_Nightline.
Trace, can we go back to the 1148 studios now and start working on our next all-new Nightline?
How do we get out of here? Go Knights!
Charge on.
Now back to you guys in the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast.
And we're back here at the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Jeff, Sharon, Eric Lopez. We're going to talk track and field, and a historic week for UCF head coach Jeanette Bolden. The Knights win the American Indoor Championships held in Birmingham, Alabama earlier this week at the Birmingham Crossplex. This is indoor track and field. So in the spring, the track and field season, they split it up into two halves, indoor and outdoor. Anne-Marie Blaney was the most outstanding track performer of the meet. She earned 26 of UCF's 112 points. She won the 5K. She placed second in the mile and the 3K. This is the first indoor championship for UCF since 2013 when they were back in Conference USA. And also 3 points for UCF in the War on I-4 rivalry series, because we beat out USF in the overall standings. We were down by 15 points to Cincinnati heading into Saturday. Cincinnati's very good, and then the results kept coming in. And this is from the release on UCFKnights.com. Natasha Jordan, a freshman, finished second in the high jump. She set a personal best. Blaney closed the gap with her performance in the mile. Rosie Chamberlain, a junior, added some more points by finishing fifth in the 400 meters. And then, we mentioned Janae Whitaker, who won the 60-meter hurdles. That helped UCF out big time. Janae Bellamy defended her 60-meter dash title, and that added 20 points to UCF's score. And then it came down to the final relay. UCF had a 6-point lead, and they got enough points in the 4x400 meter relay to clinch the championship by just 2 points over Cincinnati. Houston finishes third at 99, Cincinnati at 120, UCF at 122. So, wow, what a performance by UCF with individual titles in, let's see, 4 events, and they take home the conference, the American Athletic Conference indoor title for the first time since being a member of the American. How about that for Jeanette Bolden, huh?
Big, right? And this has kind of been long coming, right? She's kind of built a slow process when she took over the program. Maybe took a step backwards to make it better from an overall program standpoint, right, Jeff? Because Coach Gilbert had a lot of success in the tracks and in the sprints, right? But they weren't strong in other areas of track and field. And whereas I think Bolden wants an overall, and I think you're seeing an example. We just saw an example of that, right, with this performance, right?
Yeah, I think so. And listen, those of you who are old track and field people like me who appreciate the history of United States track and field in the Olympics, Jeanette Bolden's a familiar name. She's she's an Olympic gold medalist going back to the 1984 Los Angeles Games. She's a contemporary of names like Florence Griffith Joyner. Jackie, she raced alongside, or she performed alongside people like Jackie Joyner-Kersee. She knows that whole. She's in that sort of extended family of great UCF track and field, or great USA track and field athletes, and she has brought that experience to UCF, coming over from what was her alma mater at UCLA, and it is now paying dividends. Now I'm really excited to see what the and by the way, Jeanette was the 2008 U.S. Olympic women's head coach. That says something in terms of what it means to be underneath her tutelage. Such a great sprinter and someone who coached the Olympic team. So she's won national championships at UCLA, and now I think UCF is on the cusp of really making some noise in the track and in women's track and field nationwide. Now the schedule looks like this, because now we're going to head to the outdoor season. Which, by the way, the NCAA championships are going to be held not this coming weekend, but the following weekend. The indoor championships in College Station, Texas, at Texas A&M, March 10th and 11th, Friday and Saturday. And a note on that: Anne-Marie Blaney will represent UCF at the indoor track and field NCAA championships, as she did qualify for the 5K. So be on the lookout for that. And then it's the outdoor season. UCF's got a couple home meets, by the way. Black and Gold Challenge on St. Patrick's Day and the day after. They go to the Pepsi Relays at Florida. And then they got a couple other events taking place around the country. They're heading out to California for a few meets, in Torrance, California. They're going out to Tempe, Arizona, San Diego, hotbed of track and field out there, before coming home before coming back home. So they have one last meet in Florida at the Tom Jones Memorial in Gainesville. That's in late April, before the American Championships for the outdoor in mid-May. So the outdoor season, they're going to really test themselves by heading out west, which is going to be fun, I think, to see. But again, one track and field meet in the outdoor season. That's March 17th and 18th in Orlando. So be sure to be on the lookout for that. I'm looking forward to seeing what Coach Bolden's crew does out west in some of those regular season outdoor meets, aren't you?
Yeah, I think more success is coming, don't you? I mean, I know.
Oh, yeah. It feels like it really feels like, of all the sports, we talk about the resurgence of basketball and football this year, but I feel like track and field is on the verge of something really special under Coach Bolden right now.
I'm all for it. Let's roll with it, baby. Run it up.
All right, let's. We got some, not really breaking news, but semi-breaking news. Let's go over to baseball. They are at 7-1 under Greg Lovelady right now, off to a very good start, and fresh off of a sweep of Manhattan this past weekend, where they won 13-3, 10-1, and 7-2. Just throttled Manhattan, 20 runs in 3 games. Went up to Florida, lost by a run on Tuesday, the last day in February 28th. But then, literally minutes before we started recording, defeating Florida today by a final score of 11-2 at the UCF Baseball Stadium, which is what they're calling it now. What a game for UCF now at 8-1. They defeat number 2 ranked Florida, depending on the poll that you're looking at. Joseph Sheridan gets the win.
Local kid.
Yes. 71 pitches, gave up 1 earned run, 4 hits, walked 1, struck out 4, looked very good. Michael Byrne gets the loss for UF.
Another local kid. Battle of local kids.
Yeah. But you were talking about, Eric, how this is a midweek game.
Yeah.
And yes, it's good that it's always good. Listen, don't get us wrong, Knight fans. It is always a good thing when UCF beats Florida. Okay? It is never a bad thing. It is always a good thing. Okay? But, let's also be honest here. This is a midweek game, and I think that it looked like Florida kind of was like, let's just get through this. That kind of pisses me off a little bit, but go ahead.
Well, this is the thing. College baseball, their best pitchers are on the weekend. The weekend rotations, like Florida, like Alex Fredo, they got a bunch of guys. They just beat Miami that are going to go in the MLB draft that pitch on the weekends.
Yeah.
And Kevin O'Sullivan doesn't like to use his best arms during the midweek, like most don't, but him especially during when they're playing the FCC and stuff. So he likes to throw out a freshman and young kids and all that stuff. So when people look at the scores, they didn't face the top 3 Florida pitchers. So we're not going to Omaha just yet, ladies. That's what I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. We're not going to Omaha based on 1 win against Florida. Remember, UCF 2 years ago beat Florida as well and didn't even make the tournament. So, let's calm down for those that are like throwing parades because they outplayed Florida in the 2 midweek games. Look, Florida lost to Jacksonville a week ago as well.
In a midweek game.
Midweek game, and look, this state is tough, man. From a in-state battle, the talent. Every game of the midweek, when Florida is playing, Jacksonville and UCF and USF, it's a big game. USF just beat Florida State recently in a midweek game, so those teams are going to be geared up for those games. The thing I liked so far is the UCF pitching. I think, Jeff, they've got some arms. Sheridan looked pretty good.
Do.
Because the one thing I will say, we could talk about the pitching and who's pitching and who's not pitching in midweeks, but you still have talented hitters on that Florida lineup. And I thought Sheridan was very good, and I thought UCF as a staff was very good against Florida's hitting over those 2 games, and they've been very good so far, led by Robbie Howe on the weekend and Pimentel. And how about the kid Barr on the weekends? I know the competition hasn't been great on the weekends, but I feel like this pitching staff has their roles, which has been a criticism of the previous regime of, do they know their roles? Do they know what when they're coming in and things like that? This team has clearly bought into Coach Lovelady, and I think he knows what he's doing. He's obviously a proven coach, and I think this team is improved, and I would not be surprised if this team challenges to make the NCAA tournament because they're going to get opportunities to win games like that against the Florida State, who they have next week on a midweek in Miami. And then when they get in the conference, that's where the proof will be in the pudding, as they like to say. So, but look, you have to be encouraged so far from what you've seen. I think it's an improved team from last year. It was good to see some of the hitters coming on, especially with the big game against Florida at home. Now, they did leave a lot of runners on base in the loss in Gainesville, and you wonder if that's going to be the key to the season is, can these guys deliver cash in with runners on base, right? Because we've had
always the question.
Sure, but that's this offense, right? Because it wasn't a very good offense last year,
right?
And it's pretty much the majority. They lost some guys. Now, the fact that they got Kyle Marsh, they got Marsh back.
Marsh had a 3-run double tonight, by the way. That was a big hit that sort of clinched the game.
Absolutely, and I'm a big fan of his. It was unfortunate he went down with the injury last year. I know they have high hopes for him as a pitcher, but I think he's a talented hitter and infielder, a player. And if we can keep him healthy with his bat, I think he's a big part of that. Eli Putnam has been good. So, look, lots of positives. Huge win against Florida. Now they cannot have a letdown. You got, Stony Brook coming up. this weekend, I believe. And
I should also note that Marsh also had a 2-run homer in this game too. So a big game for him tonight against Florida.
And they missed him last year. And that kind of went under the radar. He missed all of last year with the injury, and I think that kind of got under the radar. But that was a huge loss for this team. I think this kid's a special. I think this kid's going to end up in the big leagues. At least compete to get a cup of coffee in the big leagues. I really do. I think this kid's that talented. Now he's got to stay healthy. He's got to be healthy. That's a big part. But I think this team with Lovelady, they're going to maximize. The one thing I'm confident in is that Lovelady will maximize whatever potential that roster has this year. Don't you?
Yeah, I think so, because I think that they're relaxed now. I think that that's the thing that we talked about, when we interviewed him a couple weeks ago. And I think it certainly shows. Well, a couple things that I thought was really impressive. You mentioned Marsh, by the way. His tally tonight: 3 of 5 at the plate, 2 doubles, a homer, 6 RBIs.
Yeah, I think he's the real deal. I really do.
He's off to a great start. The pitching this year so far, through 80 innings, they have a total combined team ERA of 1.91 and a strikeout to walk ratio of 91-19. So that's about 4.5 to 1 strikeouts to walks. And you mentioned the hitting. Marsh right now is at 382, but right now you got the guy I'm looking at right now, Luke Hamblin, he started all 9 games. He's hitting 500. He's off to a 15 for 30 start with 8 runs batted in, and he has been getting stuff done at the plate. So off to a very, very hot start. I think the bats are, and the arms are as well. Now, granted, the competition, right? You played against Siena. You played against six games total against Siena and Manhattan. But you got Stony Brook coming up, so a little bit of a tougher test. The Stony Brook's a pretty good program, so I'm interested to see how that shakes out.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up the strikeout to walk ratio, because what that tells you is that they're pounding the strike zone. They're getting ahead of hitters. Something that's been a bugaboo for this program the last couple of years is throwing strikes.
Well, because guys have been running out of gas.
Yes, and so that's the thing I'm excited is I think there's some arms here, and you look at the American Conference. I think UCF has a shot to compete there with Houston, for example, who's probably one of the favorites, if not the favorite in the league. I think USF is another, and I know people don't want to hear that on this podcast, but USF, I'm telling you, they had a lot of injuries last year, and they've got most of those guys back. And I think USF's going to be another force in baseball there with Kingston, the head coach there, who obviously has a relationship with Lovelady. Both, of course, coached both coming from the University of Miami and the Jim Morris tree. I think the UCF USF baseball, and they play 6 times. Keep that in mind. That's going to be a fun 6 games because they got some talented arms at USF that's healthy, and they're going to be up. So I think you could see a baseball, and I know you cover the baseball for the digital network. You'll be in Clearwater. I would not be surprised, Jeff, when you get to Clearwater in May, that UCF and USF are both big factors in that conference tournament, because I think both programs are heading in the right direction.
Yeah, I was really looking forward to it. I just really hope that this trajectory continues. I know it's going to be tough.
I think it will.
You're 7-2. When you get to conference play, things do change. But yeah, I mean, I think that this could be. Oh man, this I do feel that the way that Greg Lovelady is managing the pitching staff is the thing that we're going to look back at and say, wow, that's the big difference. That's what has moved UCF from where they were to where they are. I think that's going to make a big that's going to make a big difference going forward, especially when we get down to April and May.
By the way, over 3,800 at the game for the Florida game win, third largest, I believe. Crowd I saw on social media, third largest crowd ever at the stadium. Obviously, a lot of orange and blue is a factor. Mayor Buddy Dyer at the game.
Yeah,
Jeffrey.
Buddy Dyer was there. That's right.
Catching the game. Interesting to see what they draw. They got Florida State coming for 2 games. The Tuesday night game's at 6:30. Wednesday's a 4:00 game because it's a getaway day. So obviously the big draw attendance-wise will probably be that Tuesday night game. It'll be interesting to compare those two, but it'll be another opportunity for them as well, another challenge for them as they compete against FSU. And look, I mean, that's the key. If you could split these games against these teams, that will, helps you on the resume a little bit. That, it doesn't hurt to have Florida and Florida State on the resume. But it's not the end all be all. You've got to win your weekend games. You got to keep getting better. And I think that's the key. So it's early, but positive signs, and glad that, hopefully people come out to see the program more than just Florida or Florida State. Get to see them later on in the year. So we'll see.
Let's talk about softball real quick, because they had the big Alabama tournament up in Tuscaloosa. 5 games, they finished 3-2 at the Easton Bama Bash. The 2 games they lost were to Alabama. One of them 4-0, the other one 3-2 to close out the tournament. But impressive performances in the 2 games against Gardner-Webb, winning those 2 by a combined score of 14-1, and then dropping 13 runs on Texas Tech in a 13-4 victory. Eric, you follow this closely. What was the evaluation after the end of that 5-game weekend?
Success, I think, and let's add to the fact they beat Florida Gulf Coast on Wednesday in Fort Myers.
I regret neglecting that. Yeah, 5-1 win in Fort Myers.
So that concludes their trip. It was supposed to be a 10-game trip. They started in California, went to Tuscaloosa, and it concluded in Fort Myers. They had 2 games washed out in California. They went 5-3 on the trip. The 3 losses were to top 10 teams. Alabama twice, at Alabama in their backyard. You mentioned it. One of them being 3-2, 1-run game. The other one was a 1-0 loss to UCLA up in California. So I think it was a success, to be honest with you. I'll be honest. I didn't think they would go 5-3 on this trip. Or, I think with the youth, you just never know how they're going to handle the road. But I thought they handled themselves well, and it goes back to California. They won that Cal Poly game in extra innings. They gave UCLA all they can handle, 1-0. And we talked about it last week. I told you that Aaliyah White and Calixto would gain confidence from that. Aaliyah White has pitched well from that point on. She got the win against Florida Gulf Coast.
She's been another workhorse, man.
She's throwing a lot of games. She's getting stronger, too. I'll throw another name, though. Freshman Cameron Toney, kid out of Georgia. Really pitched great in relief for that Alabama game on Sunday. Really, UCF could have won that game. They had a bases-loaded situation in the 6th inning. Didn't deliver that hit against an All-American pitcher in Osorio, which not many people do. But I thought there was a lot of positive encouragements there from this young group of girls here. I think they're building the pitching staff with White. You got the senior Calixto, and I think Toney has proven that she can get them some quality innings. And I think the thing I was most pleased about in Tuscaloosa is finally you saw the offense kind of come around a little bit, right? Because we saw them both in Orlando. They kind of scuffled and struggled, and you just didn't know.
The bats were asleep when they were home, and they finally woke up.
Correct. And Courtney Roden had a phenomenal weekend in Tuscaloosa. In fact, it earned her Conference Player of the Week in the American Conference. I don't think Patrick Murphy, the head coach of Alabama, ever wants to see Courtney Roden again, because I think she has like 7 hits against Alabama in 3 career games now.
She
going
eats
back
Bama
to last
pitching for lunch.
She does. No, I mean, she went 4 for 4 in 2016 and last year when they knocked off Alabama, and she had a big weekend against them again. But the big thing that's encouraging, because Courtney Roden is the best hitter on this team, period.
Right.
Probably the best, offensive player they have. The question is, who would help her around her? And that's what we're starting to see a little bit. Autumn Gillespie hit a home run in the Alabama game. The freshman Glover, who's now kind of settled into the leadoff spot a little bit, has been productive, hit a 2-run homer in one of the wins against Gardner-Webb. Aubrey Johnson starting to hit. These freshmen, that's the thing, Jeff. They're so young. 7 true freshmen on this roster. 6 of them have played. A lot of new faces on offense and pitching, obviously. So you just don't know when does it come around. For some, it's faster. For some, it's slow. But you see the potential that they have and why the talent is there. Now they come home for 19 straight games at home. They play at home from March 3rd to March 29th. The next time they step on a flight won't be until conference in the first weekend of April 1st through the 3rd when they go to Greenville. So now they got an opportunity here with 19 straight games at home to be comfortable, to still getting better and improving and get more reps and get experience. And really, in my opinion, have an opportunity to get ready for conference, which I think is as wide open as it's been since the American Conference was created. Because you look at the American Conference right now, USF, the big news, kicked off the reigning American Conference Player of the Year. Julie Weber no longer is on the team. We don't know the reasons why, but nonetheless, she is no longer on the team. She is no longer on the team, And that's a huge loss because she was a tremendous talent at center field defensively and their lead offensively, a tremendous weapon. So that's a huge loss for them, who already lost Erica Nunn to graduation, who was the pitcher of the year. So they've got some questions over there at USF. Tulsa's got some questions that they're trying to resolve over there. So this league is wide open, and there's not – UCF has an opportunity with Aaliyah White and this has been the key to Coach Gillespie's success over the years, is to have the best pitching staff in the conference. And if they can do that, they have a shot to win the league. And with White, you mentioned being a workhorse, getting better by each game she throws. You got a vet in Calixto as a senior 2 years, and then Tony. If they can get those three to click, they might have the best pitching staff in the conference. And if they do that, they have a chance to win the league, which would be remarkable considering the roster turnover on this team with all 10 graduations from the seniors and the freshmen and all the young talent. I thought it was a very positive road trip for them, and you hope they can build on it. They got to build on it now at home, and we'll see how they handle that, right? Because there's always that sports analogy, right, Jeff? Like the hardest thing to win is like when that first home game or home series after a lengthy road trip, right?
Yeah.
That's always the challenge. And I think that's the challenge for this team this weekend when they take on Providence. They'll take on Florida Gulf Coast again at home as they begin this lengthy homestand, but a very important homestand. But I thought it was a lot of encouragement and positives that came out of this trip.
Yeah, so I'm hoping that you're right about that because, here's what they got coming up next. This UCF Invitational at home, like you said, Providence and Florida Gulf Coast, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Providence, Florida Gulf Coast, and then Providence again at the UCF Softball Complex. And then they got James Madison coming in on Wednesday, and JMU is actually pretty good too. So this homestand coming up is going to be a pretty tough one for UCF. But the good thing is they don't have to go on the road again until March 31st when again in conference against East Carolina. So a lot of home games coming up for UCF softball in the next month here. So, all right. So that brings us to some big administrative news at UCF. What was released this week by Danny White is called Our Vision, and you can see the actual link out here. UCF actually put out this really. You want to talk about some artist renderings out here for some massive improvements to the UCF athletics facilities. There's a video out there. Really impressive stuff. Here's the laundry list of stuff that they want to do, that Danny White has said that they want to do. Now, obviously, there's Ken Dixon donated $5 million over the next 10 years, and they're going to name this the Kenneth G. Dixon Athletics Village. There are going to be a lot of enhancements, sort of small things, in terms of like landscaping and things like that, but. In addition to that, they're going to get the football operations expansion and athletics headquarters building, which is going to go between the field house and the new Wayne Dench Center. That's $2 million committed to that. John Giuliano Park, which is going to be the baseball expansion and renovation, starting after the conclusion of this baseball season. $2 million committed to that. $1 million committed to the Garvey Center for Student Athlete Nutrition, which is going to be where the on the south end of the football stadium, where the training table would be, the sort of the recruit center over there. That's going to be turned into the Student Athlete Nutrition Center. $1 million committed to that. Here's what they want to do. They want to build a new UCF Basketball Excellence Center, which is going to be a new sort of renovation of the area in between the venue and the arena. And CFE Arena to sort of make it like a really big sort of basketball, really give UCF basketball a home there. All right, there's going to be a new, completely renovated plaza and promenade, leading in sort of that area in between the Wayne Dench Center, the Nicholson Fieldhouse, and the football stadium. There's going to be this thing they call the Recovery Cove, which is basically a lazy river, a pool, and what looked like a miniature golf course right on the south eastern corner of where the football stadium is. That looks really impressive. Enhancements to the Nicholson Fieldhouse. Video boards at UCF baseball, softball, and soccer and track complexes. Boy, are those badly needed. enhancements to UCF Softball Complex, and further enhancements to the track and field and soccer complex as well, kind of expanding on that. A lot in the pipeline. Now, a lot of this stuff is pending approval by the Board of Trustees, in particular the park expansion, the baseball field expansion, and the student-athlete nutrition. But here's the trick. Danny White has gone all in and said, look, in order to make this all happen, we need $25 million. Smart thing that he did that other athletic departments around the country have done. You never make the big ask until you already got plenty of stuff sort of in the bank. So $10 million has been committed to UCF facilities as of February 24th. So all of a sudden you look at that and you're like, okay, we need $25 million. Well, actually, no, we don't. We only need $15 million going forward to make these facilities happen. So you're already 40% of the way there. Have you taken a look at the stuff? What do you think?
Yeah, no, I haven't had a chance to study it in depth like you did, Jeff, but just kind of glanced at it a little bit. But look, I mean, it's the name of the game in college athletics, right? It's all about facilities, right? I mean, it doesn't matter the sport, doesn't matter if you want to compete at the highest level, you got to have the best facilities around for the student athletes, right? Isn't that the name of the game?
That's well, at least that's what they're telling us.
Yeah.
I'm really impressed with sort of the infrastructure for everything is kind of already there. There's a lot of detail work that's kind of involved in this. But I think that there are some facilities that have kind of been a little bit, I don't want to say neglected, but could use a little, a little bit more TLC than they've gotten in recent times. And I think now is certainly the time to do it. I think Danny White, this is right here is his baby, I think. Getting this major capital fundraising going in order to make this massive expansion and really set UCF
Isn't this the
up
biggest reason? Isn't this the biggest reason why Dr. John Hitt, who by the way just celebrated his 25th anniversary,
yes,
with
congratulations to Dr. Hitt.
Isn't this the biggest reason why Danny White's here? I mean,
yeah.
we could talk about this was because of his ability to raise money for the program and for the university.
Listen, if you're an AD in the year 2017, your job is to make your athletic department money through fundraising, and I think that he's gone about this the right way. He's reached out to well-off UCF alumni who and made them feel like they can contribute something important. And we've seen we know how the revenue trend is going to go with how UCF's student population expanded during the time that we were there. So, yeah, I mean, this is Danny White's bread and butter. This is what he was brought here to do, right? I'm really looking forward to seeing what they do, particularly with, sort of getting this sort of office space and they talk about like these excellence centers, but really what they are is expanded office space, weight rooms, and film rooms, and extra practice sort of practice areas for these complexes. And the other thing too that's going to be nice, and I think especially for the people who work there, friends of ours. I think when this administration building finally happens, that's going to be in between the Wayne Dench complex and the Nicholson Fieldhouse. They'll finally be able to move all of the administrative and marketing and sports information personnel over from the old Wayne Dench Center, 38 and 39, which is all the way on the exact opposite side of campus, over to where the athletics building is, or where the athletics complex is, that they're going to be calling it now. So, or the athletics village. And that's going to make things a lot easier for the folks that are working there, folks that we've known for a long time. And that's going to be a lot of fun, make things a lot more efficient, I think, because sometimes that can be, when you're working there, it's kind of a pain in the neck when you had to go back and forth between, the old Wayne Dench Center and basically everything surrounding the new Wayne Dench Center. But, wow, it's pretty amazing to see, like how much has really happened over on that side of campus since we were students. I mean, remember when we started out there? We were freshmen. We had just the arena, and then we had the soccer field, and then the baseball stadium had just happened. They just finished the softball stadium, and that's it.
Yeah, it is kind of crazy where we're at now, where we're even talking about jumbotrons and video boards and
lazy
all
rivers
this stuff. It's just kind of crazy.
and some people got the future. By the way, I saw a little bit of complaining on social media about like, oh, I'm so glad that everything is my money is going towards a lazy river for the athletic department. First of all, you don't know what you're talking about, because guess what? That lazy river is being paid for with private donations. All right, so stop it. Your tuition money's not going to a freaking lazy river. That's dumb. Whoever said that is dumb. But but again, like, if you want to, listen, we've been saying this. Like, we're supporters of UCF athletics. You and I both are. We have been since we were students. This is the game that we're playing now, and I'm happy to see that UCF is going to be, not just caught up to other schools that are sort of in their neighborhood, but I think leading schools that are, not just they're going to be among the leaders. Certainly, I think in the state in terms of facilities. At least that's what they're trying to go for, and definitely in terms of comparison within the conference, and that's what they're going for. So I'm really impressed with it. You got to check out some of these renderings, man, because this is like kid in a candy store type stuff. One of the things they mentioned was softball improvements. We know that there's baseball improvements coming.
Right.
I didn't see any details on what they were going to do with softball, but I'm curious to know from your perspective, as someone who knows the softball program well. So, what are some of the things that you think need to be are due to be sort of improved upon, fixed, renovated with the softball stadium?
Well, I know a new scoreboard, which seems to be the theme, right?
Yeah. The one at the baseball stadium wasn't working today. Did you see that for the Florida game?
Yeah, they've had issues with that this season. So both of them could use a new one. But, I mean, it's crazy. It sounds. I mean, I've been to all these other softball stadiums. They have video scoreboards now. They have jumbotrons. I mean, that's the name of the game in the recruiting battle. So you need that. I think expanding the seats, because this program has grown to the point where when you're playing Florida and you're playing Florida State and the Alabamas of the world and you're playing top competition, I've seen a lot of standing room capacity. And you're almost limiting yourself because – it's a tough act because you don't want fans to just watch the game in the outfield for free, right? But so I think expanding the seats are good. I think they could see expanding the press box a little bit to possibly help you host regionals down the postseason. I'm sure baseball would feel the same way in their situation. So I think it's kind of both sides would probably tend to agree on that. I think the big thing too with all these moves, your goal is help all your teams get better, but also it helps your brand better. So you never know, 10, 20 years from now, if people decide to change, make some changes in conferences, now you become more attractive than maybe you were at the present. And even if that's not an option, you're trying to bring more revenue internally. And so I give them credit for that as well. So there's a lot of goals here. Hopefully it works out. I am a booster officially. So
actually that makes
am I the one? But I'm not a part of the river guy.
That makes the two of us, by the way, as of this week too. So I'm glad to disclose that to everybody. All right. So as we finish up here, Eric. By the way, I'll post the video in the show on the show page on blackandgoldbanneret.com. What do you have coming up this week, Eric?
Well, we got mentioned softball, right? They're back home this weekend, and I'll be back on the booth there. In fact, I think I'm calling my 400th game this weekend. I think it's going to be
a little milestone action for Eric.
Yeah, I've been doing calculations. 10 years in the booth.
When is game number 500 going to be? That's going to be in the 2019 season? I'm guessing, right?
I just want to get through this weekend and next week, and then I'll worry about that down.
I know exactly how you feel. It's like, just get me through this weekend without saying anything dumb.
Exactly. That could maybe halt the count, Right. But no, yeah, I'm looking forward to be back out there. I'll be out there this weekend, calling the action for that weekend, and I'll be calling pretty much the entire homestand. So. Yeah. Looking forward to seeing this team continue to grow. So that's where I'll spend most of my next few weeks, really. We'll be doing that. And then when I'm not doing that, I'm producing Tuck and O'Neill and weekdays on the 1080 in Orlando. We're also on in Gainesville and Ocala. So
that's right.
We're mapping the world. So that's where you can find me on Twitter on Eric Lopez.
I will be doing PA for the Friday game for UCF Softball. That is the Providence game. 3 p.m. first pitch for that. So looking forward to that.
You're bringing the food?
Huh? No, I didn't. I'm not planning on it this time. You know what? That was such a big hit. I'm going to disappoint some people because I brought some leftover. I had some. What was it? I brought over some homemade nachos, chicken and beef nachos last time, And Gina Catalano over there, who runs marketing for softball, she's going to be upset with me because I don't have any food with me for this Friday. So I don't know what I'm going to do. I got to make it up to everybody somehow. But anyway, but yeah, so I'm going to have that coming up. I got a couple more softball games coming up to do in PA as well. And huge thanks to Gina. And I wanted to also thank Chris Walsh from UCF Marketing, who was kind enough to let me do some women's basketball PA this year. And I had a blast doing that and watching that team grow throughout the course of the year. So thank you to Chris, and I'm looking forward to seeing what UCF basketball does. And you never know. We might, boy, wouldn't it be cool if we hosted a postseason game? That would be pretty neat. So, who knows what's going to happen with that? So I have no idea. I don't think anyone really does at this point. I think they're just trying to get through that Tulane game and then see what happens. But all right, Eric, and you said Eric Lopez, Elo on Twitter. You can also follow me at Jeff_Sharon on Twitter. Follow us at UCF_Banneret, at blackandgoldbanneret.com. And I wanted to send out a very special welcome, by the way, as we finish up here, to Brian Murphy once again. So most of you guys already know he's back. He's here. But Brian Murphy, who wrote for the Sentinel, or not for the Sentinel, but for the Future, when I was working in the video department. He is back here in Orlando, and he's going to be covering a couple things, mostly baseball. But Brian will be here. Will be on Black and Gold Banneret. He will be writing some stuff for us as well, and hopefully we'll have him on the podcast very soon too. Hopefully next week to talk a little UCF baseball. So thanks again to Brian for joining up. I'm so glad that he's with us because I never have enough time to write, and I know we have. And I know that there are a lot of folks who want to do some really good writing. I know that you've done a great job with some of the softball stuff, and now we're going to have Brian doing a little baseball. So,
nice.
Thanks again to Brian and
Murph.
Yes, big welcome to Brian Murphy. We'll have him on the podcast soon enough, Eric. So, and again, thank you to you fans for sticking with us through another marathon edition of the UCF of the Black and Gold Banneret podcast. Yeah, go ahead, Eric.
One thing, we got to congratulate Andrew and Trace this upcoming weekend, their 100th edition episode.
That's right, 100 episodes.
I may or may not be a cameo in there. We'll see how that plays out. That's the other thing I might be doing. Nice. But nonetheless, even if I'm not, congrats to them on their 100th episode.
Yes, congratulations to Andrew and Trace on episode number 100. Here's to another 100, and here's to maybe more crossover episodes between us and them in the future, because that's always been fun. So for Eric Lopez, my name is Jeff Scher. Oh, by the way, don't forget, subscribe to this podcast if you don't already on iTunes, SoundCloud, Google Play, and TuneIn. Don't forget to leave us a rating on iTunes and reach out to us as well on the UCFsports.com message board, and where we always post the show, and also at blackandgoldbanneret.com and on our Facebook page as well. So for Eric Lopez, my name is Jeff Sharon. Thanks for listening. This has been the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. We'll catch you again next week.
Today's episode is brought to you by Cars.com. With over 2 million vehicles and 50,000 more added every day, Cars.com will match you with the perfect car for you, your budget, your life, your style. And if you're ready to say goodbye to your current car, Cars.com will get you an instant offer to cash it in. Just start by entering your license plate and get matched with a local dealer who will write you the check. So whether you're looking to buy or sell, just go to Cars.com. It's magical.